Hello, my name's Cathy Walters and I'm going to tell you a story. And this story is called The King of Ireland's Son. There was once a king of Ireland and he had 3 sons, the youngest of whom was called Art, and he was by far the king's favourite, which of course didn't go down too well with his 2 older brothers. Well, one day the king called the brothers into his chamber and said, "Can you hear this beautiful heavenly music? It is wonderful to listen to, and I would like to find out where it is coming from. Whichever one of you finds the source of this music and brings it back to me here, you will inherit half of my kingdom." And so the 3 brothers set off together. And as they went down the road, they came across a hole. And from this hole, they could hear this beautiful heavenly music. So the 2 older brothers nudged each other and they said to Art, "You go down that hole and see if you can bring up the music and we'll wait here and pull you up." And so Art, wanting to please his brothers and get back in their good books, agreed. And so they helped him squeeze down into that hole, which led into a narrow cave with a long tunnel. And as soon as Art disappeared, his 2 brothers scarpered. Well, Art was on his hands and knees, crawling along this dark, dark tunnel. He crawled all day until he saw a glimmer of light. And when he got to the light, there was a very old man sitting there, and Art asked him if he knew where this heavenly music was coming from. And the very old man said he was sorry he couldn't help him. But if he went along the corridor a little bit further, he would come across a very, very old man and he might be able to help him. But he thought it would be best if Art shared some food with him that night and got a good night's rest. And so Art agreed. And the next morning he thanked the very old man and he continued his crawling along that tunnel until at the end of the day he saw a faint glimmer of light. And indeed he met the very, very old man. And he asked him if he knew where this heavenly music was coming from. And the very, very old man said he was sorry he didn't know, but if Art continued to crawl along the tunnel, he would come across a very, very, very old man, and surely he would be able to help him. But he suggested that Art stayed the night and shared his food and got a good night's rest. And so the next morning, Art set off again, crawling along that very dark, narrow, damp tunnel until he saw a faint glimmer of light. And when he got there, there was indeed a very, very, very old man. And when Art asked him if he could tell him where this heavenly music was coming from, the old man said, "I'm sorry, I can't. But share my food and have a bed for the night, and in the morning we will see what we can do." And so Art did, and the next morning the very, very, very old man said to Art, "If you keep going along this tunnel, you will come across a stallion. That stallion will take you to a garden where there is a big house, and you may find your answer there. But beware, because in that house lives a very evil giant, and he will kill you." So Art thanked the very, very, very old man, and he continued crawling along that tunnel until he came to the stallion, who was happy to help him. "Get up on my back," he said, "and I will take you to the house." And so Art did. And they travelled for a day and a night and a day and a night, and then the following day they arrived at the gates to the garden with the house beyond. "I cannot go any further," said the stallion, "because of the giant, but I will wait here for you." So Art thanked the stallion. He climbed down off his back and walked through the garden and into the house. And in one of the rooms he saw a beautiful maiden, and the voice was so lovely it was indeed the heavenly music he had heard. And she told him that she was the Princess of Greece, and that a giant had kept her there for a year and a day, and it would take someone of great courage to free the spell that he had cast over her. And just as Art was about to ask her some more, he heard a loud thump, thump, and there came the giant. "Who are you?" he roared at Art. "What are you doing here?" And Art explained that he was the King of Ireland's son, and he had come to take the maiden with the heavenly voice back to his father. And the giant said, "I will not let you take her. You will only be allowed to take her if you can complete the tasks I set for you. I am going to hide from you, and if you don't find me after the first day, then you will have a second day. And if you don't find me after the second day, then I will kill you, and I will skin you alive, and I will boil your bones, and I will eat you for my supper. But if you manage to find me after the second day and after the third day, then you will have 3 days to hide from me." And so Art agreed to the challenge and said, "Could we please start our game tomorrow, because I need to go and look after my stallion?" And the giant surprisingly agreed. So Art went back out to the stallion and said, "I don't know how I'm going to manage this. How will I find the giant?" And the stallion said, "Do not worry. Let us get a good night's sleep, but first you need to eat. So put your right hand into my left ear and see what you pull out." And so Art did, and he pulled out a lovely tablecloth. "Now put your left arm into my right ear and see what you pull out." And so Art did, and he pulled out the most beautiful feast you could imagine. And when he pulled out again, there was a bucket of water and some hay for the stallion. And so they feasted well that night. And then the stallion told him to lie on the ground underneath him and use him as a blanket. And so Art did. And he got a good night's rest with a full belly. And the next morning he said to the stallion, "I don't know how I'm going to find that giant. How am I supposed to know where he is?" And the stallion said, "The giant is at the top of that tree." And so Art climbed up to the top of the tree, where indeed he found the giant. And the giant ranted, and he raved, and he roared, "You may have found me today, but you won't find me tomorrow." And so Art climbed back down that tree, and once again he had a good feast, and he slept well, using the stallion as a blanket. And the next morning he said to the stallion, "How will I find where the giant is today?" And the stallion said, "Go through the house, and in the middle of the back garden you will see a big football. Give it the biggest kick you can." And so Art did. He went through the house, through the room where the maiden was still singing, and sure enough, in the middle of the back garden was a massive football. And he gave it the biggest kick that you could ever imagine, and out rolled the giant. And he ranted, and he raved, and he roared. And he said, "You may have found me today, but you will not find me tomorrow. And then I will cut off your head. I will skin you alive, boil your bones, and eat you for my tea." So Art once again went back to the stallion, had a good meal, and got a good night's sleep. And the next morning he said to the stallion, "I really don't think I will find that giant today." But the stallion said to him, "Go to the room where the princess is singing, and without using your voice, ask her where the giant is." And Art was a bit puzzled at this, but he went into the room where the princess was still singing her beautiful song. And without using his voice, he asked where the giant was, and he was most surprised when she pointed to her finger. And then she made as if to take the ring off and throw it. And so Art very gently slid the ring off her finger, and he threw it into the fire, where the giant came out half burned, and he ranted, and he raved, and he roared. "Well, you may have found me 3 times, but I will surely find you when you hide." And so once again, Art went back out to the stallion, where they feasted on good food, and he had a good night's sleep. And the next morning he said to the stallion, "I really don't know where I can hide. The giant is sure to find me." And the stallion said to him, "Take one of the hairs out of my tail and crawl up into that hole, and the giant won't find you." And so Art did. He took one of the hairs out of the stallion's tail and he crawled up inside that hole. And although the giant stomped around all day and shouted and roared, he did not find Art. And so the next morning, Art said to the stallion, "Well, where can I hide today? I managed yesterday, but what am I supposed to do today?" And the stallion said to him, "Take a nail out of one of my hoofs, crawl up into that hole and pull the nail in behind you, and the giant will never find you." And so Art did. He pulled out a nail. He crawled into that hole and pulled the nail in behind him. And although the giant ranted and roared and screamed and yelled, he did not find Art that day. "I will find you tomorrow," were the last words Art heard that evening. Well, the next morning, Art was really quite worried. He thought this would be his last day. Where am I supposed to hide today? The giant is sure to find me. He is so angry. And the stallion said, "Pull one of my teeth. Crawl up into that hole and pull the teeth up in behind you, and the giant won't find you." And so Art did. He pulled out one of the stallion's teeth. He crawled up into the hole and he pulled the tooth back in behind him. And the giant did not find him. He ranted and he raved and he roared. No supper for him that night, and he got so cross he dropped down dead. And so Art went back in, and she told the princess that she was going to take her back to meet her king. And so they got onto that stallion's back, and they travelled a day and a night, and a day and a night, and the following day they arrived back at the king's palace. And the king was overjoyed to see his son. And Art said, "This is the Princess of Greece, and she is the one with the beautiful heavenly music." And she opened her mouth, and that lovely voice produced that beautiful sound. And the king was so happy and so cross with the two older sons for what they'd done to Art that he banished them forever. And he did indeed give Art half his kingdom. But this is a fairy tale, and as in all fairy tales, I'm sure you can guess the rest. Art and the Princess of Greece fell in love, and it wasn't long before there was a wonderful wedding with the most beautiful food you can imagine, with the stallion being one of the guests of honour. And of course, as in all good fairy tales, Art and his bride did indeed live happily ever after. Thank you.